Welcome to USS Global. For some time now, Israel has extended its war against Hamas in the Gaza Strip to Rafah. Since many Hamas members have fled to Rafah, IDF officials have announced that offensive operations will continue in this Egyptian border settlement. In fact, hundreds of people were killed after the last Israeli airstrikes in Rafah. In response to the risks in Rafah, Egypt has deployed its military forces and built a wall around the border settlement. This paved the way for Hamas to take refuge in Rafah and take advantage of the chaos to deploy military resources in the area. Israel had already claimed that Hamas battalions had fled to Rafah. However, the Israeli military authorities discovered that in addition to Hamas's buildup in Rafah, the group was preparing for renewed counterattacks in all areas of the Gaza Strip. Israeli offensive operations in the Gaza Strip have therefore continued apace, with heavy aerial bombardments and assassinations. The Israel Defense Forces, IDF, announced that in the last 24 hours, it carried out extensive airstrikes in the Gaza Strip, while ground forces neutralized a large number of Hamas members as the fighting continued. IDF officials said that as part of these airstrikes, the Israeli Air Force destroyed Hamas targets, including the group's operational headquarters, military buildings, launching positions, and other targets. In the southern city of Phan-USA, the focal point of recent fighting, the paratroopers brigade continued to raid critical targets and defused an explosive device. In addition, the 7th Brigade of the Israeli Armored Corps reported eliminating 12 Hamas gunmen in Phan-USA. Israeli forces have been expanding their operations in the southern Gaza city of Phan-USA for weeks, most recently, as you know, calling on civilians in a hospital there to move to safer areas. The situation in the Gaza Strip's last functioning hospitals became even more complicated after hundreds of displaced Palestinians were ordered to leave by the Israeli army and Hamas threatened further action to stop its activities there. Thousands of Gazans have sought refuge for weeks in the Nasser Medical Complex in the southern city of Phan-USA, many fearing that Israeli forces would bomb or storm the complex. Mohammed Abu Lehya, a doctor at the hospital, said previous Israeli warnings to evacuate hospitals, including Al-Shifa, Gaza's largest medical center, were often preceded by military raids. Tensions at the hospital emerged after Israel recently launched extensive airstrikes in southern Lebanon in response to a deadly rocket attack on northern Israel. Israeli officials reported that the rocket attack hit a military base near the city of Saft, killing 1 soldier and wounding 8 others. No one immediately claimed responsibility, but suspicion quickly fell on Hezbollah, the Lebanese militia allied with Hamas. In other words, Hezbollah was held responsible for the activities of IDF military units in Phan-USA's Nasser hospital. However, the Israeli army said that the real reason for the operations in the hospital was Hamas's activities in the area. The Israeli army even accused Hamas of conducting military activities on the grounds of Nasser Hospital, claiming that the area was used to hold hostages. In a statement, the Israeli army demanded an immediate halt to all military activity in the hospital area and the immediate departure of military operators. The army also ordered civilians to evacuate, but did not call on patients and medical staff to leave. Israeli military officials, for their part, called on civilians sheltering in the hospital to leave for safer areas in southern and central Gaza. It said it had opened a safe route to evacuate the civilian population in the hospital. A video posted on social media showed crowds of people leaving the hospital, many carrying belongings and bedding, as explosions were heard in the background. However, many Palestinians and aid groups said that nowhere in Gaza was safe, and doctors at the hospital and the Gaza Health Ministry claimed that some people had been killed and others injured as they tried to flee the hospital compound. The Israeli military did not respond to questions about these allegations. Offensive operations against Hezbollah, which has been implicated as one of those responsible for the events at the hospital in Phan-USA, were also in full swing. The Israel Defense Forces reported that warplanes bombed a Hezbollah military compound in the southern Lebanese town of Kantara overnight, eliminating a large number of its armed elements. The IDF said the attack severely damaged other military infrastructure near the town. According to the Israel Defense Forces, Hezbollah has been firing across the border for the past 4 months, since Hezbollah began firing rockets into Israel from southern Lebanon in support of Hamas in Gaza after the group launched attacks on October 7th. Hezbollah is therefore primarily blamed for the attacks in the Gaza Strip. The IDF also claims that Hezbollah provides military and material support to Hamas. For this reason, Israel reports that it is engaged in a serious struggle against both. Hamas and Hezbollah on both fronts. In other words, the border lines surrounding Israel have turned into a battlefield. In this gigantic battlefield, attacks continue to take place non-stop, while critical steps are being taken through political channels for peace talks. Most recently, negotiators met in Cairo on the second day of talks, aimed at reaching an agreement that could halt the fighting and secure the release of hostages taken to Gaza during the Hamas-led attack on Israel on October 7. The talks were closely monitored by Israel, Hamas, and Hezbollah. At the moment, Israel and Hamas do not appear close to an agreement. However, last Tuesday, after the first day of high-level talks ended without an agreement, an Egyptian official briefed on the talks described their progress as positive. Following these statements, Israeli news media reported that Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu withdrew the Israeli delegation from the talks. Prime Minister Netanyahu's office said that Israel was determined not to give in to Hamas's imaginary demands. The news outraged the Hostages and Missing Families Forum, a group representing relatives of Israeli hostages whose members began pressuring Netanyahu to do more to secure the release of the captives. The group accused Netanyahu of deliberately sacrificing the lives of the abductees by withdrawing from the talks. Members of the group also told the press that they planned to stage a protest outside the Prime Minister's residence in Jerusalem. In other words, voices against Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu were rising. Meanwhile, Mahmoud Abbas, the head of the Palestinian Authority, which partially governs the Israeli-occupied West Bank, called on Hamas and Israel to reach an agreement and suggested that he could prevent a devastating Israeli attack on Rafah. In a statement reported by the authorities' official news agency Wafa, Abbas said he urged everyone, especially Hamas, to quickly finalize the agreement in order to protect the Palestinian people and remove all obstacles. In addition to the ceasefire proposals, the humanitarian crisis in Rafah also dominated the agenda. With food, water, and medicine scarce in Gaza, the Biden administration recently urged Israel not to block flour shipments to UNRWA, the main UN relief agency for Palestinians in Gaza. UNRWA head Filipe Lazzarini told reporters that some 1,050 containers, mostly filled with flour, were being held at the Israeli port of Ashdod. Filipe Lazzarini added that this would be enough to feed 1.1 million Gazans for a month. Bezalel Smotrich, Israel's far-right finance minister, accused UNRWA of playing a role in the October 7th attack and its aftermath. In fact, Israel released further details, including the details of 12 employees of the United Nations Agency for Palestine Refugees in Palestine, UNRWA, accused of involvement in the attacks and kidnappings on October 7th, and their alleged role in Hamas. There were 10 other Hamas members allegedly involved in the attack, but Israel has provided no evidence to support its claims that they were involved in the attacks. A spokesperson for UNRWA said that the United Nations' highest investigative authority was looking into the matter, but declined to comment on additional details provided by Israel for the investigation. UNRWA also quickly fired 10 of the 12 employees Israel accused of involvement in the October 7 attacks and launched an investigation into the allegations in hopes of maintaining the flow of international funding to the agency at a critical time. The United Nations announced that 2 of the 12 had died. In the aftermath of all this, there is growing curiosity about what might happen on the battlefield in the coming time frame. It is unlikely that Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu will abandon his war plans after the pressure on Israel. The U.S., on the other hand, is expected to make surprise moves to prevent Israel. On the other hand, Hamas is not likely to withdraw from either Rafah or southern Gaza. It is a far-fetched assumption that Hamas and Israel will be able to agree on a ceasefire in the near future. In other words, in the coming days, we will once again see a lot of action on the battlefield. We may also witness critical steps in the world political arena in order to direct the war. Thank you for watching us.